Instead of kind of generate me 7 figures and we'll put a paper together, it's like you get me milestone 1 in 3 months and I'll release you another load of money to do milestone 2. And it's kind of it's almost this gamified theory of success. It works really well. When I was making the decision to leave the UK, the option, typically is let's have a look at San Francisco or Boston. That's where all the money is. That's where all the big biotech is. But if you really want to make an impact, you want to go somewhere where that ambition is really percolating. And I think Melbourne really had that vibe. It was a really good place to kind of come and make your stamps.
Kia ora and welcome to LabMates Beyond the Bench. This is a podcast sharing the stories of how scientists and their research move beyond the lab bench and into the real world. And today we have Lee Booty, and I'm excited to hear about his career journey and all the things that he's passionate about around research, commercialization, venture, startups, industry, and beyond. So, Lee, could you tell us a little bit about what you studied? Throw us back to, I think we're a similar age, so throw us back to what you studied in undergrad, postgrad, and where that was at.
Yeah, thanks, Maddie. Thanks for having me on. It's a great privilege to be here. So I think, my journey really starts super early. I kind of had some family that was sick and was super interested in the sort of the progression of disease and sort of how you intervened in that setting and how we could better intervene. I was exposed to maybe some of those side effects of the medication that my particular family member was taking. And so I was really interested in researching and how to make new medicines and how to make that process better. And so made the decision to go and study biomedicine, in the sense that undergraduate at the University of East Anglia in Norwich, which is a very rural university in the UK. But it had an excellent program that mixed really well the elements of research that were critical for drug development, but also with that real world patient facing experience. And so I think there's a real tendency, and we can get into this a little bit maybe later on, around when you're doing research and doing particularly academic research, you lose the focus and the perspective of the patient. And so that really enticed me into the biomedicine degree program. And I always vividly remember this, and even to the point of the course title of 2B01 biochemistry during my second year. We did an experiment on an oxygen Clark electrode, which was this tiny little machine where we put kind of liver mitochondria in the top, and we saw these things respiring in real time. And at that particular moment, I decided, if I'm going to pursue this research career, I want to understand what these mitochondria are doing. Couldn't get over this idea of a powerhouse, that sat in every cell in our body and essentially acted as batteries. And so, at the end of my undergraduate degree, decided that the most useful path for me would be to go and pursue a career in research. And the intention there would be to better myself as a research scientist, but fundamentally give myself the tools and the skills to develop a future drug that would impact potentially hundreds, thousands of people. And so to do that, and particularly with this mitochondrial space, I moved to the Medical Research Council in the University of Cambridge as a PhD student, studying very, very niche areas of mitochondrial biology. And I was there for a number of years, followed that up with a small postdoc. Really, that was my kind of academic career, if you like, up to that point.
Fair enough. Did you at that point want to stay in academia, or did you kind of know that that wasn't maybe the way that you could achieve your ambition with bringing a drug to market?
That's a really good question. So I think during my PhD, I was hell-bent on being an academic.
Mm-hmm.
And I finished my PhD, started the postdoc still with that intention of being an academic. And I always remember this moment of talking to some people and engaging with my network, and a couple of those folks were working in industry and biotech. And they were talking about things, numbers, screening in 384 well plates and using these high performance liquid handling robots. And I'm thinking, why on earth am I doing this with a single channel pipette? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And I thought, if I want to do this at the scale that I need to do this at, I need to move somewhere and really get that experience of drug discovery and really understand what it takes to take a discovery from academic idea or academic concept through to a real life translational asset, if you like. And to do that, I think the only way was to move out of academia. And so there was this reluctant academic inside of me that decided I maybe need to move somewhere else to gain these skills, and realized probably during my postdoc I wasn't going to get that in academia. And so then, made the move across to industry, but very much with a toe still in the academic world.
How did you keep your toe in the academic world? Because I feel like it's always, and you would have had the same misconceptions that I did, was that industry is the dark side, academia or industry is like a very black and white situation. So yeah, how did you have one toe still in academia? And is there a secret there?
Yeah, I was really fortunate. I have to hold my hands up here. And actually, the world's moved on quite a bit here between when I started my industry career to where it is today. I was really fortunate. So I was finishing up my postdoc. I'd made the decision that I needed to move into an industry setting. And I was looking at jobs at AstraZeneca and GSK. And fortunately, growing up in the UK, we were primed with pharma companies in my local area. And so that really helped. There was within the golden triangle of the UK between Cambridge, Oxford and London, there was biotech springing up everywhere. And so I was going along and interviewing and applying for jobs. But one thing I really noticed was that the standard industry job, the sort of quote unquote dark side, the screening scientist or the, whatever you want to call it, didn't really excite me. I'd kind of got a few offers and I was a bit on the fence and stayed in the academic setting just for a bit longer. And then what I was able to do was find a job advert that came up and make contact bizarrely through the WeHi, which is where I am now, but of somebody that was going on secondment to GSK as part of this immunology network. And this was the brainchild of an academic who had moved to GSK as a senior leader in the immunology division, where what he wanted to do was build an integrated academic network within GSK, and with that bringing highly skilled sort of academic scientists to come in and run research groups. So although I moved to GSK and it was very sort of quote unquote industry, I was still in that academic world and I was still able to go to conferences, publish papers, do all the normal academic things, but also then just soak up all of this industry knowledge and drug development knowledge, which is what I was after. And so I have to admit, I was really fortunate in that job appeared when it did. But the good thing is nowadays, there's a lot more schemes like that, and companies are really integrated and embedding that sort of academic creative side within their structures.
Yeah, so how long ago was that? And is that program still available in, I guess, GSK, but also is that quite common in the UK? Like, we don't have big pharma like that here in New Zealand. I don't know about Australia, but maybe, do you know of any that still do similar R&D type groups?
Yeah. So that was 2017 when, the Immunology Network started around 2015 and I moved into it in 17. Evolution of the Immunology Network moved into various different facets over the next sort of just shy of 8 years, which is how long I was just about there. The Immunology Network as it stood no longer exists at GSK, just strategy changes and other things. But what they've now done is invested the money in the sense of generating other academic interaction. So that academic industry relationship still survives, but in very different ways. So they have groups now at Oxford and Cambridge that are linked to GSK, for example, and they fund research that way. Some of the better examples that exist nowadays, I mean, AstraZeneca have got an amazing program with the University of Cambridge where they fund tens of PhD students a year, and they have an active AstraZeneca supervisor and an active University of Cambridge supervisor, and the two of them work hand in hand essentially to work on something that AstraZeneca needs to know more about, but they maybe need the expertise of the academic, and the academic needs that industry experience to really prosecute on something, and that works really well. And most companies nowadays, I mean, if you're a aspiring sort of research scientist and you're interested in this space, like you just go onto Genentech's website, AstraZeneca, Eli Lilly, GSK, and look for those academic strategic alliances. You'll be able to find what they are. Look for those academics that are actively involved in industry collaborations. Often they'll be publishing with industry or however they go about that. And so these things are really strong in the UK and the US. Here in Australia, we're helping to build that in the current role that I'm doing now. And so trying to build up that ecosystem of biotechs and trying to expose people, particularly here at the WeHi, that are currently undergoing a research PhD or a postdoc, how to think commercially, how to think translationally. And that really should help shape the ecosystem in the right way to build the next wave of biotech and hopefully build that kind of golden triangle, if you like, that we see in the UK.
Amazing. that is the same thing that I spend a lot of time thinking about, is how do you get people away from that really traditional academic brain and mindset, shift them into something that's a little bit different, and to be able to sell their capabilities, I guess, beyond the academic setting as well, right? So like getting them to think that there is possibility in that industry collaboration and all the great things that that could lead to.
Yeah.
How are you currently, if you can talk to it, like programs as well as people and money, like how does this all sort of going down? Is that what you spend your time thinking about at the moment?
Yes. So my current role is as a venture principal scientist, whatever that means, on a Monday. is basically doing exactly that. So we would take sort of expressions of interest from the academics that are within WeHi, or we would actively seek out particular experts in areas of research that we have a real interest in, and we basically try and identify those kind of rough diamonds, if you like, where the academic might see that as the next Nature paper or whatever you want to call it. But we see it as a Nature paper plus, where we can still allow that academic to go on and publish and still do what they want to do academically. But we want to really encourage them and leverage sort of some of our money to unlock basically a whole nother realm of discovery, which is that commercial drug development path. We're really fortunate here at WeHi that we have the National Drug Discovery Centre, we've got the Centre for Biologic Therapy, so we've got kind of integrated platform technologies that will allow us to make small molecules, antibodies, do diagnostics, that type of thing. And so what we can really do is take an academic creative concept and with that academic help build what that drug discovery pipeline might look like. And we'll do that by deploying our own funds. So we've got currently 66 million Australian dollars over the next 10 years to enable this and catalyze it, but then using the facilities around us and the people around us and the networks to really drive kind of those concepts forward. And what we might do is deploy what we call tier one funding, which can be sort of in the sort of hundreds of thousands of dollars realm, to really proof test or stress test a concept. And we'll answer some really fast fail questions, get them through the door and say, okay, is this a valuable concept or not? And if it is, then we look to then a much bigger investment over a longer period of time. And together with the team, you know, we help build, we're all sort of ex-industry scientists. And so we've got that expertise of how do you build a stepwise, often milestone driven, or definitely milestone driven process that maybe doesn't come naturally to the academic. You know, the academic is more used to that jumping from grant funding cycle to cycle, and how do you keep the lab alive? How do you keep people funded and resourced? And what we really want to do is say, let's just stress test this idea. Let's try and break it. And if it doesn't break, great, we'll keep moving. And so, you know, that's a very different way of thinking, a very different mindset, but we're hopefully installing a little as we go.
Is that, like, are you quite focused on a single idea? Or I would say that's how I've thought about it, or I can see what's happening in New Zealand. It's very single idea technology, whether it's going to be usually startup is where they put the most money, sometimes for licensing, but kind of sounds like you're thinking a lot bigger than that in terms of capabilities in people, but also capabilities in a service-based interaction as well as like licensing and developing a spin out. So is that like is that how it works for you guys?
You've hit the nail on the head, Maddie. It's a full spectrum. And so some of the stuff we're looking at, it's purely to get researchers to the next level, which might be towards a collaboration. And so, you know, we're really fortunate here in Melbourne. We've had Moderna and BioNTech really invest heavily in the mRNA space here in Victoria. And so some of the research we're doing is purely to get people to almost to a point where they can collaborate with these big industry players and learn from them and really push that forward. And so that's kind of one arm. And then the other arm is, you know, we're syndicating with local VCs, and, you know, we're now sort of getting more engaged with international investors as well to spin up really big things. And so, you know, these are like double-digit million investments, and really take these things over a sort of 3 to 5 year timeline. We're really looking to get things into the clinic, get involved in clinical facing assets. And so, yeah, it's the full spectrum. And somewhere in between there, we've got sort of more things that would be akin to licensing plays and things that we would hope that you could, you know, out license to a big pharma partner, for example. So yeah, there's a whole ton of things, and it's also quite modality agnostic. You know, we've got a really good diversity in the pipeline. WeHi has a particular strength in small molecules. It always has. And really the NDDC and the Drug Discovery Center we've got here really helps with that. But we've also, recently taken on a diagnostic. We're assessing sort of tech platforms. We're in active discussions around AI, sort of technology advancements there. So yeah, it's a full range. It's something that I really enjoy. It's coming out from where you are in the academic space, where you sort of focus very solely on one protein in one cell type, and this is like one meeting might be around, I don't know, neurodegeneration, and then the next meeting's around a diagnostic for anemia. And so it's a completely different world as we go.
It's really nice to see how you have it as a whole ecosystem as well, because I think it's very hard to get things off the ground if you're really focused on one type, like just creating spin outs, but you don't really have all the pieces into play. So it's nice to see that you've got that longer term vision. So is WeHi Ventures a technology transfer office for WeHi then? Is that how you guys operate, or is it slightly separate sometimes? I don't know.
Yes and no. No, it's a great question. So we have our business development office within WeHi that's sort of more akin to your traditional sort of TTO within a sort of university, if you like. WeHi Ventures operates as its own separate entity. And so we kind of obviously have close links to our BD colleagues, and we sit in the same office as them, and we're very aware of their pipeline. They're very aware of ours, and they, are very involved in what we do. Same goes for legal and finance and all the other elements you would have within a typical university structure. But very much WeHi Ventures is its own thing, and in the sense that we have our own sort of pot of money, we have our own sort of talent and our own FTE associated with that. Our own decision-making capabilities, along with our investment review committee. Depending on the size of investment, we would seek advice from external consultants or that investment committee to help us make that decision. And then work with our BD colleagues in the sense of, if something was coming up for a spin out or a license, whatever, that's where we would work closely with them or whoever the partner institute would be to sort of take something forward.
That's interesting, because I think most of the New Zealand ones, from what I know, are more associated to the traditional within the university. But in the UK, it was a real mix, depending on how the setup was, whether they had an independent arm or not. And obviously pros and cons to each aspect. And I think you've got both. So I guess you've got the best of both, depending how you want to play the investment space. So is some of your funding completely independent from the WeHi then? And yeah. So you have that full autonomy.
Exactly. So the way it works is that we're sort of a separate legal entity from WeHi itself. But the intention of the fund is that, we don't have shareholders or private sort of investment in that sense. So the money originally, or the fund originally, comes from the sort of WeHi investment. And so any potential future returns just spin straight back into WeHi and fund future WeHi research. So it's much akin to the kind of venetoclax story that really the WeHi kind of basis is founded upon. And so hopefully the venetoclax 2.0, if you like, is sort of the future of WeHi Ventures. And so, that's the idea of really trying to build that within WeHi. But I think, if I may, just to sort of go a little bit more holistically in a wider picture, is to really help build an ecosystem where WeHi is a part of that, but we want to work with our colleagues at University of Melbourne, with Monash, with PDI, all the sort of expertise that we have in this local ecosystem here, and work with the local investment groups. So most, Melbourne have their own, Monash have their own, etc., to try and build something that's much bigger than what we currently have. And I think that was the mission statement that really got me excited, when I was making the decision to leave the UK. The option, typically is, let's have a look at San Francisco or Boston. That's where all the money is. That's where all the big biotech is. But if you really want to make an impact, you want to go somewhere where that ambition is really percolating. And I think Melbourne really had that vibe. It was a really good place to kind of come and make your stamp. So, it's what really excited me, is building that ecosystem. And I think you touched upon it earlier, that opportunity to expose traditional research academics to a different way or a sort of complementary way of doing research was quite exciting.
Yeah. And how have you felt the academic response to that kind of program or those kinds of relationships coming out. Do you I see it as a spectrum. So I feel like there's some really good engagers and there's some people that are like peeking over the fence, and then there's the people that you're never going to get them out of their mud pool, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the same?
You've absolutely summed it up really well. But what I'm really excited about is going into that mud pool. So, it's super great to work with those that are innovators, natural entrepreneurs, and we want to push those as hard as we can. And we've got really exciting stories of people. There's no better feeling than when you first meet somebody that comes across as incredibly entrepreneurial. They're thinking about things in the right way, but they maybe haven't had the right channel or the right way of executing that skill set. And so we can now provide that. And I'm thinking about one particular person that we have just invested in who's really on that track, and I'm sure will do incredibly well. And then you've got these like you say, these folks at the other end that are sort of in the mud pool of the academic world. But what I'm really excited about there is, as we see the success from the early projects coming through the ventures pipeline, the heads start turning from those guys at the other end, and they go from seeing the fund from another pool of money that they can apply to something that's actually impactful and could be quite useful in the long term. And so actually just this week, we had a really excellent contingent from the UK come over and visit, and we had some of those researchers that maybe had come to us with very academic ideas and sort of, weren't really sure about what we were about, kind of suddenly realizing, oh, hang on, this is actually how you do it. This is how you translate something forward. And because we're starting to see some of those early successes where we turn a project that we call a tier 1, which is that kind of proof of concept, early stress test, into a tier 2, which is now a full drug discovery campaign, you're starting to get other people kind of look at it and go, yeah, I could see ourselves in that situation. And this really strikes true with those early career researchers, because what we've seen is that those that, are kind of at that sort of crossroads of their career, where they're either committing full gas to academia with that sense of uncertainty that academia might bring, they're looking at this as an alternative and thinking, yeah, okay, I could probably build something, let's give it a go, And I think the examples of all of us actually in the team that are all ex-academics have gone into industry and are now sort of sitting back in an academic institute, albeit from a sort of different angle. They go, oh, okay, so that myth is actually breakable. You don't need to go to industry and die there type thing. It's you can come back and you can be flexible with it. And I think that's a really nice story to tell and take that across to early career researchers. So yeah, it's an exciting challenge though. It's definitely a challenge. I'll give you that.
That is so nice to hear you say it, because I've said that for a while now, that, there are always the early adopters and the maybe people, and then the don't touch them because it's just not worth the effort kind of feeling. But I always hoped that it would be exactly as you say, that once you start proving the how to do it, and that it's a possible pool of money that keeps you in your research, but in a slightly different way, that I thought, yeah, heads would start turning. So that's quite cool that you're actually seeing that happen in real time, and building that out. And I've also thought that it would be the early careers that would be more attuned to that possibility, because you're right there, it's very competitive in academia, and it's very hard to find your place. And I think it's easier if you know you're going for that more impactful pot. It's a little less competitive, or at least it's a fun, different risk that you're kind of chasing.
It's been really interesting, just on your point around it being competitive. So what we've tried to do with the 6610 fund is it's a really highly competitive process, in the sense that it's, maybe competitive is the wrong word. It's highly diligent, and it's a high bar, and we do that intentionally so that when people bring us their ideas, we really want to see the coachability of those people, and we really want to see them respond to feedback. And so that exact example I was talking to you around the entrepreneurial skill set brought us an idea that was fantastic, but was maybe being deployed in the wrong way. It was a very academic idea, and it was a very academic concept. And we, being the industry scientists, kind of looked at it and said, the idea and the concept's fantastic, but you're deploying it in the incorrect setting. If you deploy it here instead, and this would be your 2-year plan to get it to that point, you could have something here. And instead of them, which is what you would get with maybe the sort of stuck in the mud folk, you'd sort of get that, oh, I'm not changing my way. Instead,
Mm-hmm.
we got an incredible great response, which was fantastic. Tell us what to do and we'll go and do it. And that's what we want to see. And so, we really want to see that coachability and that learned behavior of responding to feedback. And it's not criticism, it's just feedback. And that really helps a long way as a founder or as an entrepreneur as you build, to learn from those around you. I mean, you want to go and talk to people that have done this time and time again. Yeah, we like to see that a lot. And we try and set the bar really high for our potential founders, in the sense that they have to come through us. We filter out a lot of the ideas, we change the ideas, we help them build, and then we take that to an independent panel. They come in with their feedback and so it's a multi-step process to get it to a point where something looks like it's investable for us.
I think that's really good, because I have seen proof of concept funds just be seen as an alternative pool of money before, and maybe not serious enough about how they would take that beyond. And also really funny about the feedback, because I had a conversation with someone recently about how academia doesn't necessarily set you up for feedback. Like, you're always defending your ideas and not often necessarily listening to what might be a different opinion that could be valuable. So
that's a very, very true and very true observation. It's a learning curve, and I think the earlier you get into that mindset of, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. You always want to be surrounded by those people that know this better than you do. And you can bring your concept and bring your idea, but be a very amenable and moldable in that sense to what those around you are saying. But be strong as well and know what you want to do with it, and not be swayed. But at the same time, listen to those ideas and respond to them. That's a really good trait for any potential founder or entrepreneur in life sciences space, because it's tough. It's a really tough place to be. You're not developing an app where you just stick it on the app store and people pay for it. You may be embarking on a 10-15 year journey of generating a molecule that you don't even know whether people want or need at the end of it. It's a crazy place to be. Yeah, it's good to listen to those around you, for sure. And like you say, I don't think academics, the context of academia, at least when I was going through it, sets you up particularly well for that. I think people are a bit more responsive now. There's a lot more entrepreneurial seminars and workshops and these types of things. So hopefully that kind of ecosystem is slowly changing.
Yeah, I can see that. And I think I like to think about it as there's always something to learn. So every event or thing that you go to, there's always some conversation that you might learn from, and being open to who that might come from is also a really powerful thing. I think it's becoming an entrepreneur definitely opens your eyes to a lot of stuff you don't know all of a sudden. And it's kind of the opposite of my academic training, where you start feeling like you know a lot about something. And now I know nothing. Do you run a lot of those programs as well for your scientists at WeHi? Is that a thing that goes on?
Yeah, so we've definitely, we're still building the fund. We're 2 years into its life cycle, but there's definitely a lot of strategic objectives around building that ecosystem here to WeHi. And the way we're currently doing that is very much project specific. So we're really encouraging early career researchers to become project leads and work directly with the venture scientists or the ventures team to learn from that. And as well as the BD colleagues to kind of get that commercial understanding and how do you do target validation? How do you build upon a drug discovery program that means that you position your asset in the right way? How do you choose the right modality? These things that people aren't going to know. They're not trained for it. And so we are trying to actively go to local events, go to talks, given a few talks myself in the next few weeks around target validation and sort of the ecosystem that we're trying to build. And I think that's definitely one of the strategic objectives of us as a fund, is to really encourage that. And I know that other local VCs are really engaged with some of the local sort of the wider community events. Like the Nucleate event, for example, is a fantastic cohort of people, all led by students. Highly recommend, if you're a student and you can get involved in the Nucleate chapter, you do so. They're really strongly supported by sort of VC funding and local kind of networks of really key people that you want to know if you want to try and build something up. And so that type of thing is something we're really trying to actively encourage. And it's been really great to see particular individuals respond so well to the change in research direction. Instead of kind of generate me 7 figures and we'll put a paper together, it's like, you get me milestone 1 in 3 months and I'll release you another load of money to do milestone 2. And if you do that, and it's kind of it's almost this gamified theory of success. It works really well and people are super responsive to it. If they're the right types of characters, we really drive it. And like I say, the early career researchers, they respond really well to this type of milestone driven research. I think it's a really healthy thing to build into academics. I've seen so many projects within academia that should have died a long time ago. I just sort of keep going around the circle, and having that mindset built in, because even if these folks that come into the ventures portfolio and then they continue on an academic trajectory, which, we don't want to get in the way of course, if they end up as PIs or they end up as lab heads, they've always had that learned experience of milestone driven research and fast fail experiments. And so instead of turning the handle for 3 years because you have to, it's how do we alter this? How do we adapt? And that I think is a really big thing that academia can definitely learn from industry for sure.
I like thinking that you're slowly changing the face of the way an academic setting looks secretly. Yeah, I like that. And I see a similar thing. I mean, I did some stuff in my postdoc where I was like, are we done testing this thing 5 different ways now? And
it's an interesting process because the whole intention of what Paul Peter Tak, who is the founder of the immunology network at GSK, wanted to do is the opposite, was change the way industry thinks with academia and bring that creative flair and bring that outside of the box thinking. Biology's changed. It's become very complicated and it's very expensive. And the average sort of new molecular entities entering the market has not increased with the expense of the R&D, even if you adjust for inflation. And so there needs to be a new way of making drugs. Otherwise, companies are just going to keep losing money. And so the idea from GSK was this immunology network. And the intention there was to sort of go in and tell scientists at GSK, you can't throw 4 million compounds at a problem anymore and expect to solve it. You need to think your way out of this. And that was a really nice experience. And it's kind of seeing what worked there and what didn't work so well, and now just flipping it on its head and sort of doing it this way. So it's a very unique and fun skill set to have, that's for sure.
And that's interesting that it was like kind of in the reverse, but I think it's a good point. I mean, maybe I see it as one way, but it is a both way problem. And that is
massively.
Nice.
It's a huge problem, and something that I'm particularly passionate about is that real bridging the gap between the two. And being able to talk the language of industry scientists and academic scientists is a unique translating skill set where you need to know what the key performance indicator is from an industry scientist. What's their objective? That's how they learn, and that's how they drive their research forward. Whereas for an academic, it's about, getting the paper out there and becoming that sort of reputational expert in the field. And how do you connect those two together? And I think in the past, those two would just butt heads. There was no obvious way of doing that. And I think now that somewhat melted away and we can find connectors between them. And, there's excellent success stories of how that works. I mean, the WeHi story with Genentech and AbbVie around venetoclax is an excellent way of doing that. A key discovery in that pathway at WeHi, development of a brand new anti-cancer drug that's now treating millions of patients. It's a great success story of that. And you can really see in those academics that are actively involved in that program, they've learned so much from that. And I'm sure if you went and spoke to the Genentech and AbbVie scientists, they learned so much from the academics. And so it's just trying to multiply that and encourage that in a more sustainable and holistic way.
Do you think that the WeHi scientists, with the exposure that they're getting, are more likely to be successful in applying for industry jobs just because of those kinds of experiences that they're getting?
Yes, 100%. And I think I can talk to this on some authority, where when we look to recruit within GSK, we would always look at hundreds of applications from PhDs coming out of every university under the sun. But if any of those PhDs had worked on milestone driven, it's in the language of that application. It's about transferring that skill set from a PhD or a postdoc to project management, to matrix management, to objective driven science, to research milestones. It's putting it in the right language and appreciating what you do as a PhD or as a postdoc. It's the same thing as what you would do in industry, but in the sense of it's a different mission and it's a different approach. But fundamentally, the nuts and bolts are exactly the same. You're given the same bits of kit and the same problems and questions to answer, but it's applying the skills in the right sense. And so I think the realization that we see, particularly from early career researchers here at WeHi when they're engaging with us, is the milestone and the fast fail approach. It's just an added string to their bow when they can apply for jobs going forward. And so we've seen, again, the person I was referring to is particularly interested in moving into industry and is very interested in how he can use his research and his experience with us to essentially build that skill set. So yeah, we're definitely actively encouraging that from our side.
Good to know, because I do think that's something that is a struggle, and like it's not taught necessarily how to sort of transfer your skills. And I think some of these barriers are coming down with those kinds of collaborations, and then it will just make it a bit easier for the more academically trained scientists to move. But I do see that as a barrier at the moment. I think I can ask you one last question, which is going to be, do you still see yourself as a scientist, which is in your title? So I'm curious to know.
Yes, I do. And I think I would hope I'd still reply yes in 40 years' time, because I think once you're trained as a scientist and once you've discovered the passion for science, one of those, it almost feels inbuilt within your DNA to be curious and to be excited about novel discovery. And I think for me, there's no better feeling than when we walk into one of our project team meetings, and actually just before this, I'd received an email from one of the project teams saying they'd discovered something really unexpected about the project and how it all fits together. And that gives me a lot of gratification and excitement. And so that kind of curious academic or curious scientist is definitely still in there. I think in the context of the current role, there's a lot more strategic thinking. There's a lot more kind of soft skills in the sense of influencing and sort of, thinking about how the bigger picture all fits together in the sense of the wider portfolio and individual projects. But fundamentally, they're all built on a foundation of good science. And so making sure that we're still very much in touch with that, making sure that we're on top of the literature and we can still engage with our colleagues, academic colleagues in particular, it's right up there with the key skills of the day, if you like. So very reluctant to not call myself a scientist. I always feel like the best leaders that I've ever worked with, I'm not going to name and shame anybody here and do name drops, but I'm thinking about one person in particular, become particularly senior, was senior at GSK and was head of group and everything. But she just had a real passion for science, and you could just see the excitement in her eyes when she would talk about, tiny little transcription factors that were doing one thing in a tiny subset of cells in a particular disease. And that real scientific curiosity, I think, pulls people along with you. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, a really strong leadership quality. And to see that as we're trained as scientists at such an early stage, you've never lost that kind of almost childlike curiosity, I think that really helps. And so hopefully I'll retain that and that's what I class as being a scientist, if you like.
I feel like you've just convinced me that I'm going to forever call myself a scientist because it sounds so cool.
Exactly.
Well, this has been awesome. I think we're going to wrap it up for today. So thank you very much for joining me on the podcast, Lee. It was amazing to hear your journey and all your learnings and all the mindset shifts and all the progress that you're making in Melbourne. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Maddie. It's been a pleasure. Really fun.
Thanks for joining us on the LabMates Beyond the Bench podcast. We love sharing the stories of how scientists and their research move from the lab bench into the real world. LabMates is building a digital home for scientists to connect and collaborate. It's free to join, explore public groups like our Career Accelerator, or create a private space for your network or community. Come be part of the movement at LabMates. We can't wait to see you there.